about.
No, I don't. Megadeth Christmas album? Oh, good God.
You're gonna have to show this to him during the news or something, because
Is that when they do Holy Wars?
no, like it's like Megadeth singing a bunch of straight up Christmas songs.
Is it worse than DMX doing?
Rudolph the reindeer.
It might be worse.
Josh Robert Thompson, who was Jeff the Robot.
The robot skeleton sidekick from Ferguson.
You may have seen him on YouTube. He's the guy that does Morgan Freeman's voice. Have you seen any of that stuff?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, like the sprinkles, because they can't say the first word on the... You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, you know.
Yeah.
We'll have to play that for him during the break, too, I think. Yeah, that show was absolutely hilarious. And I like the Late Late Show at any rate. I mean, pretty much every host after Tom Snyder, because that was usually just good cure for my insomnia. But
Tom Snyder, wow. Well, you were like 3?
I think I would have been like 7 when 7 or 9, because Kilborn started, what, 90-something, 99, I think? And
Nobody remembers Craig Kilborn.
I don't think even Craig Kilborn does it.
I remember Craig Kilborn when he started The Daily Show.
I liked it better on the Late Late Show, because the Daily Show with him,
Nobody liked him, period.
It was a different kind of...
funny.
It was a different kind of show altogether. I liked it a lot. Well,
he's hanging out with Steve Harwell these days.
What about all the talk shows that have fallen by the wayside?
Arsenio.
I missed Arsenio. I like.
They brought
Arsenio
it back for like a couple of years, and
it just didn't work. But I mean, who hasn't had a late show? Well, you mentioned George Lopez,
Magic Johnson, The Magic Hour.
Oh.
It was like the worst thing ever.
Chevy
Chase. That was the second worst thing to happen to Magic Johnson.
God.
Let's not go. What was the first, Wes?
No. Let's not go there.
Are you positive?
Live on 92.1 FM WFOV, also live on Facebook and on YouTube. How's it going today, Vic?
Fairly well. I'm doing pretty good. Coming off of my little holiday break. Just chilling, you know, that type of thing, you understand? How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. Apparently we are going to have a real winter this year.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you know, since you can't leave Earth.
Yeah. You don't want to leave Earth.
I may still be alive. I don't have a rocket in my backyard, but since you just have to deal with it.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
It's been very cold these last few days.
Freezing.
I saw all these different maps of the United States and how everyone's describing how the country looks right now. So like they have for California like on fire, then over in like certain areas over there in the West, it's like, why is it this cold? And then, other areas they're like Icelandic temperatures, and then for us they have like I don't know how to pronounce
Arctic weather.
Right. And then for us they have this the really, really cold place from Star Wars.
Oh, no doubt about it.
They're like, how are you guys living in that weather? Like,
it's winter in America.
It's a nightmare.
That was a song by Gil Scott-Heron, you know, back in the day. You know what I mean? You know.
It's back in your day?
Oh, yeah, back in my day, man.
Back in your day.
Yeah, I was coming of age in the 70s. You know, I was a little kid, but I was coming of age all the same, you know. So,
right. Hey.
Winter in America.
Yes, and so we just want to urge everyone to stay warm. Stay warm.
Absolutely.
Do whatever you can. If you do not have to be out, do
Absolutely.
not be out. If you know of any homeless people or any shelters that they can go to, make sure you look out for them. If you can give them blankets, whatever extra thing that you can do for those who are not fortunate enough to have shelter in this type of weather.
Absolutely.
Make sure that you look out for them.
Absolutely.
And we have a really good show today. We're going to deal with classism.
Wow.
Starting the new year off right.
Yes, absolutely. No doubt about that. Yes.
Dealing with a very serious issue, something we definitely have to take a look at. And I just want to start off with the definition of classism, which is basically prejudice against or in favor of people belonging to a particular social class. And it includes individuals' attitudes, behaviors, systems of policies, and practices that are set up to benefit the upper class at the expense of the lower class, or vice versa.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. So let me ask you this question, because you wanted to talk about this, and I'm sure you wanted to talk about this for a reason. There's a rationale that you have concerning why you think that we should talk about this topic.
Because it's a real thing, and we avoid talking about it so much. And I think that what happens is because a lot of people don't live in the reality that classism exists. Or they don't understand how it affects their everyday life, or they may not necessarily know what classism looks like. And I think sometimes it's so easy for us to get caught in the very base kind of surface thing of a race issue that we forget that we are very much in a class war. Whether you want to be in it or not, you are in a class war. And so I think it's important that we talk about what that looks like.
So then that presupposes the next question that I have for you, as I'm interviewing you now. It's almost like, you know, which came first, the chicken or the egg, as it relates to racism and classism, because they're almost twins, right? I mean, when you mention racism, particularly, you know, in our 21st century America, when you mention racism, you almost have to talk about classism, and when you mention classism, you have to talk about racism as well. So how do you view these twins, racism and classism? Do you view one as being more predominant than the other, or for instance, in 2018, do you think that we're facing a social order that is more classist or racist, or a combination of the two?
Listen, I think that they kind of go hand in hand. One is kind of in certain aspects, one is a result of the other, and one helps fuel the other.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily as easy as separating. I think that we just needed to be aware that classism is real, as opposed to we just focusing on racism.
Okay.
Because when you have to look at the war, the whole war on classes, on class, it's not as simple as, oh, you're black or this or that. It forces you to realize, black, white, whatever, that either you have the wealth or you do not.
Yes,
and if you do not,
yes,
this is a result of that. So there are different forms of it. Obviously, institutional classism, which is the way in which conscious or unconscious classism is manifested in various institutions of our society.
That's interesting. Conscious or unconscious. That's interesting. So what is that suggesting then? That we're actually buying into a system?
We do.
Unconsciously?
We do. We absolutely do.
Huh. Okay.
We do, and I think that once you begin to look at things such as class, you'll recognize that you have even people within the same race become divided.
How so?
Because it becomes. Jay-Z has a song.
Okay. All right. It's called 444 album.
Yeah. And he has a song that's called OJ, and it's really interesting of how it kind of makes reference to the fact that because he got to a certain class or certain economic standpoint, he's like, I'm not black anymore, I'm OJ. And even though that's not quite what he meant, that's the best example that I can give of it almost feels as if you can transcend your color if you reach a certain wealth.
Can you though? That's a great point you're raising. Can a person, quote unquote, transcend their race? If you're black, a black woman or a black man, and you become a multimillionaire or a billionaire, can you transcend your race?
I don't know. I don't have enough to tell you. Right now, I'm still black.
Wait a minute. Right now, you're still black until you make that first couple of million, huh?
No, I think I'll still be black then. I've lived black long enough to stay black at this point. But no.
Wow. So did O.J. Simpson transcend his blackness?
No.
You didn't? No. I remember OJ now. That goes back to my time period too. Man, let me tell you something. In terms of the let me tell you something. In terms of the NFL running backs that I've seen, O.J. Simpson was one of the baddest running backs I have ever seen in football. That dude was bad. O.J. was bad. I'm just telling you, Candace. Okay. I remember they used to have all these commercials and whatnot. O.J. Simpson would be running through the airport and whatnot, jumping over chairs, making his way to his plane and stuff like that. So O.J. became so popular that I think he actually really believed that he transcended his race.
Keywords are you said he believed.
Yeah, he believed. he believed that. But Jim Brown, would have to pull his coattail, you know what I'm saying, and say, O.J. brother, you may be popular, but and you bad on the football field, but you still black, brother.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that carried a different connotation, of course, in the 60s and the 70s, vis-a-vis the civil rights movement, the black power movement, and the struggles, the economic struggles, the class struggles that we were still faced with in America. But O.J. Simpson was very popular, and he was accepted. Oh, you got that look on your face. What are you thinking?
I don't have a look.
What are you thinking?
I think that once you serve your purpose, you are back to who you are.
Back to reality, like that song, Back to Reality?
Right.
So do you think that every black person, like an OJ, whether the person is a popular athlete in the NBA, the NFL, in tennis, like Venus and Serena Williams, whatever the case may be, maybe in business, in industry, we reach a certain plateau and then we're reminded, well, you're not actually in the club. Is that what you're saying?
Again, I don't know. I'm sitting right here. Using a coat and a scarf to face this weather, not hopping on a plane to change the weather. I have to wait 5 minutes like you have to wait 5 minutes. So I don't know.
Well, okay, now you're a smart sister. So based on your observation then of the social context, as you observe in Oprah Winfrey and as you observe persons of that stature in the black community,
I don't think that it matters once you get to a certain point. And then I kind of want to get back on topic, though, because Oprah has had stories where she's gone to other countries being Oprah.
Okay.
And gone into stores, and because people didn't necessarily know who she was,
okay,
she was still treated like, oh, how can you afford to be here? So
True.
I think that kind of answers it, but I do want to get back on just dealing with prejudice against or in favor of people belonging to a particular social class.
Okay.
Because it's what we're looking at now. I think that and I know we did quite a bit of research. You had some things that you wanted to talk about. I know you were saying. Go ahead.
Because context is important, right? Because of course classism doesn't exist void of a context.
Right.
Classism doesn't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't operate or function within a vacuum.
Right, and I do want to be clear when I use the word class warfare, or if I say class conflict or class struggles, I'm just talking about tension in society due to competing socioeconomic interests and desires between people of different classes.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's what I mean when I say class warfare. It's just basically the tension that exists due to competing socioeconomic interests.
Okay. Then having said that then, Candace, I think it's important then for us to establish the context, as we are citizens of these United States of America. America, by and large, its economic system, although it is a mixed system, it is a system comprised of both capitalistic features and also socialist features. However, we are by and large a capitalistic even economic structure.
We are.
Right? So, now, have you... I hear something in your voice. It doesn't sound favorable, like you have anything favorable to say about capitalism.
Go ahead.
Let us provide the audience with the textbook definition of capitalism. It's an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods, by investments that are determined by private decision, and by prices, production, and the distribution of goods that are determined mainly by competition in a free market. Capitalism, right?
Right.
So you haven't heard anything yet, right? You haven't heard anything yet. But now having said that, now which source should I read here? Because I brought a number of different sources here. I brought a couple of books by.
Go ahead, library. Pick which source you want.
I brought a couple of books here by Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand. Now have you had a chance? For anyone who has not had a chance to read any of Ayn Rand's writings, she was a very provocative writer, and I brought two books with me. One is referred to as For the New Intellectual by Ayn Rand, and the second one is Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Now, Ayn Rand was I believe she was from Russia. I know she was from Eastern Europe. She was born there and grew up there, and she eventually moved to the United States of America. She was a prolific writer, and probably two of the greatest books that she's written would be Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. And I believe a couple of years ago there was a movie made about Atlas Shrugged. Now, Candace, I have to say this though. Ayn Rand was a cheerleader for capitalism. She was very provocative writer. I don't agree with a lot that she says, but she makes for interesting reading, and she's a very provocative writer, extremely provocative writer. Let me find something here in her book, from an excerpt from her book For the New Intellectual. I just want to spur some conversation here from Ayn Rand. I know I'm going to poke around in the embers there, and we'll have something interesting to say. In her book For the New Intellectual, she's addressing a set of problems that she at that time felt existed in American society. Now it's approximately 1960 when she makes these statements. And
then while you look for that, I'll just say hello to everyone that is watching on Facebook. Thank you so much. Aldi Lewis said, "Do y'all thing, love the show." So thank you, Aldi. And we just want to say hi to Tim and everyone else that is watching right now. We want to say hi to everyone that's watching on YouTube right now as well.
Yes. Now, mind you, she's a very provocative person. She was a very provocative person. And I'm going to read something that's going to, raise your ire here. Now, mind you, this is 1960 when she's writing this. In politics, we are told that America, the greatest, noblest, freest country on earth. Now, it's 1960 now.
1960, got it.
Is politically and morally inferior to Soviet Russia, the bloodiest dictatorship in history, and that our wealth should be given away to the savages, now get this, to the savages of Asia and Africa, with apologies for the fact that we have produced it while they have it. If we look at modern intellectuals, we are confronted with the grotesque spectacle of such characterizations as militant uncertainty, crusading, cynicism, dogmatic, agnosticism, boastful self-abasement, and self-righteous depravity in an atmosphere of guilt, of panic, of despair, of boredom, and of all-pervasive evasion. Now, what do you know? Now, when I read that paragraph last night, I said, "Wait a minute now. She's referring to the people of Asia and Africa as savages."
You're quoting her.
I'm just. What do you think about that statement there that she's making here? She's saying that we're the producers, we're the vanguard, the economic vanguard in civilization at this time, and we're creating these things, and now people want us to give away the wealth that we have created to these persons. Okay, here's a point that I like to raise here. Savages compared to what? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, really, savages compared to what? A person can be a millionaire, a multi-millionaire, or a billionaire and still be a savage.
Right. A
person can be an intellectual and still be a savage.
Most of the time, and I'm just going based off of American history, most of the time that someone is a millionaire or billionaire was because they were a savage. They participated in savagery to get it. But just saying.
Okay, sure.
If we go off historically with America and how this country was built, let's be clear. If we talk about generational wealth or old money as far as America is concerned. So I think it's kind of harsh to refer to someone else as a savage when I don't know, pot, meat, kettle. I don't know. That's the best way that I can put that. But that does bring up some of the points I wanted to make about class conflict and the different forms that they can take on. Okay. Direct forms such as violence can take place. Indirect violence such as death from poverty. Coercion such as losing a job.
Okay. Sure.
Ideologically such as let me see, like books or articles or news or media.
Sure.
And then political, legally or illegally lobbying or bribing government leaders for passage of legislation.
That's savagery, right?
Different forms of class conflict.
Okay. Yep. Which is savage.
Yes. I'm just saying. I was saying when you read it from her, because she was so quick to call someone else a savage while defending capitalism, I'm just saying let's be clear on how we were able to build this society that we have.
Yes.
So if she wanted to use the term savagery, I just wanted to be clear on what we have to call it all what it is.
So you're really going to like this next quote from her. Because she's really, now this is very provocative, because she's really making an assessment of the total human condition, you know, with regard to how civilizations have developed and the manner in which they have gained access to wealth, wealth creation, production, and things of that nature, and the belief systems, the value systems that people have. Now, I'm coming here still in the same book for the New Intellectual on page 24, and she's going to introduce some prototypes here, and we'll just have a conversation about this. It says that the first society in history whose leaders were neither Attilas nor witch doctors. Now, when she makes reference to Attila, she's making reference to the man of war, right? The military. And when she makes reference to witch doctors, she's making reference to religion. So men and women of faith, essentially. So she says again, the first society in history whose leaders were neither Attilas nor witch doctors, a society led, dominated, and created by the producers. Now it's here, Candace, where she begins to introduce the idea of capitalism, right? Was the United States of America. I'm going to read that one more time here. It says, the first society in history in history whose leaders were neither Attilas nor witch doctors, and I'm going to get your response from that. A society led, dominated, and created by the producers was the United States of America. Interesting. And I'll read another brief passage here, then I want to hear from you. It says, the moral code implicit in its political principles was not the witch doctor's code of self-sacrifice. Again, she's making reference to religion here. The political principles embodied in its constitution were not Attila's blank check or brute force, but men's protection against any future Attila's ambition. What do you think?
Go ahead and read that definition of Attila's again.
Attila, you want me to read this over? Or
No,
just say
remember how you were explaining what she meant by Attila and witch doctor?
And Attila is the man of war. She's making reference to the military.
Right.
And the witch doctor makes reference to the person of faith. Mm-hmm. She's making reference to religion.
Now, what did she say again about America?
She said that the first society in history, whose leaders were neither Attilas nor witch doctors.
She said that America was the first society in history.
Yes, whose leaders were neither Attilas, men of war, or witch doctors, men of faith.
What does it say on the dollar bill?
In God we trust.
Which makes them have to be allegedly men of faith. That kills that whole they weren't witch doctors.
Now
right?
people argue whether they were.
I'm just saying.
They argue what faith, what God, number one.
But it's still a faith, correct? So that kills that argument. Because it's still a faith.
Yeah,
And then when she said Attilas, again, they came over. The Indians, the Native Americans said, "Hey, how you doing?" And they said, "We want this land."
Right? They got the land now. So they got them up off the land. No doubt about that.
Which would make them the Attilas. She said they were not, correct? I'm just saying.
I knew we were talking about classism. And I knew that we were going to get into capitalism. So I thought that it would be only right to bring in the leading apologist of capitalism, Ayn Rand, right? And I have to say this, though. When we look at our current context, our current political and social context, we must know that in the Republican Party, particularly among the conservatives, they revere Ayn Rand.
I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked. I'm going to tell you why I'm not shocked, though. And this is, again, no slight to whomever.
Sure.
But just based on the definition that we were given under what we're going to use as Attilas and witch doctors, she's speaking against whatever she's saying. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying, I said she was a provocative writer. She's a very provocative writer.
Wilson joined us and said that motto was added later. I'm not quite sure which motto you're talking about there, John, but let me know. He says that motto was added later.
Okay.
But you're saying, so I'm not really shocked that she's allegedly revered by Republicans.
No, she is.
I'm not shocked.
She's the beliefs, and I think that what we see in the policies of the party that's in power now, that's in office now, really embraces the views of Ayn Rand.
Right. I'm not going to go too far in because, again, I'm not that familiar with her work. But just from that little paragraph that you've read, I feel as though there may be some confusion.
Okay.
I'm just saying. We do want to welcome everyone that's joining. Hi, Raphael. How's it going? A couple people. And then as far as our YouTube viewers, I'm sorry I can't see you today, but hello, everyone over on YouTube. He said the "In God We Trust" on money was added later.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for that, John.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Right. But I do want to get into a little bit more of when we talk about classism, what that looks like, and some of the class conflicts and the different forms it could take on. I know one of the areas that I did mention was ideologically, such as books and articles, and I wanted to talk about the effects that the media plays as far as classism and how it shapes the way we see it. And what we constantly talk about, especially on this show, we talk about, and I often use the word propaganda, but today I'll just say the narrative that is given.
Keep it real. Keep it real, sister.
I was going to say the
propaganda. Don't use euphemisms now.
I'm just going to say the narrative that is often given.
Oh, my goodness.
And we have to look at the role that the media plays in this whole class warfare and the way that It's in the same way that with how we can view different races based on what we see on television. If we do not have any other interaction, well, obviously with the different wealth systems, whether it's wealth, rich, poor, poverty, because we do have to make sure that we know that there's a distinction between all of them. That because the wealthy don't necessarily have to interact with those in poverty, nor do the rich, and vice versa. We do not all get to interact with one another, and so the media plays a part in how we see each other. Oftentimes, we think that just because someone is of a particular class that they lack education or that they lack ambition, because that's what you see on TV, and you'll see some homeless person, they'll go, "Oh, he's so talented," put a little money in his box, but they don't talk about his backstory, and they go, "Well, he never went to school, or he didn't finish past 4th grade," and that is not the truth behind a lot of that narrative that's given told. A lot of people that you see are homeless. Quite a few of them have college degrees and are educated. A lot of them have gone into debt behind getting those degrees that was supposed to get them a better life.
Sure. Yeah, and I think also what we find that certain persons who are homeless have suffered emotional breakdowns. We never know, using your terminology, we never know what a person's story or narrative is. There are persons who've served in the military. They are veterans who've served in a variety of different wars, ranging from the Vietnam War to the Gulf War and whatnot, and they find themselves now destitute and on the streets and so forth. And remember, going back at least 10 plus years ago, 15 years ago, I remember when in the state of Michigan, they began to close down different shelters and whatnot, and they began to eradicate programs that would be able to help persons who were facing the difficulties of life, and they just put them on the streets.
Right.
And I think this is part and parcel of the conversation that we're having now, right? Because really we're looking at a philosophy referred to as neoliberalism, which is a leading social, political, economic doctrine or worldview, that we find today.
And then I think another thing that we look at in the way that media shapes the way we see wealth, it's automatically that you're educated or because you went to the finest schools. I have to tell you, there are a lot of dang, I don't want to be rude.
Go ahead.
So I'll do air quotes, rich dummies. So, but we often find that just as...
Tell me how you really feel.
But just as think about, you have so many wealthy people who did not necessarily work for that money. True. It was passed down. A lot of other people who didn't actually gain the education they needed to have access to those finer schools.
Yes.
And so just like wealth can be generational, poverty can be generational.
Yes, absolutely. No doubt about that.
And I think that we need to truly examine that. And again, we have to look at the role that the media plays with that. We hear things such as Harvard and Stanford and Yale and all of these other schools, and these people have gone there. But you often find that those people who have gone to these schools who come from money, and not everyone, I'm not saying everyone, I'm putting the disclaimer out there now, but you'll often find those people who were there, they not only did they not earn their way to get there, but once they got there, they didn't earn those degrees. It was given because my daddy bought a wing or because my family bought the library. So we have to be careful in allowing the media to help us to assume that money equals intelligence.
Sure, absolutely.
Sometimes money just equals granddad had a plantation. And that's reality.
Granddad had a plantation. All right. Woo! Tell me how you really feel today.
I'm just being serious. So we can't automatically assume everyone that comes from money, they earned it. And we can't assume that everyone that lives in poverty, that they, quote unquote, earned that.
And this is a hard life, right? And it's not fair. However, I think what those persons probably are benefiting from is an inheritance that their family provided for them.
Poverty is an inheritance as well.
Now we could talk about how. Now we can delve into how did those persons make those millions and millions and millions of dollars and such. Some persons did not do it from an ethical standpoint, whereas some persons did. Right.
And I do want to take a minute to, again, welcome everyone from Facebook, YouTube, and everyone that's listening, 92.1 FM live. here in the great state of Michigan.
Of Michigan.
Right. No, I like being from Michigan. But Paul's always screaming say something about Odyssey House. We want to thank Odyssey House for partnering to make this wonderful radio station possible. WFOV 92.1 FM. Once again, thank you to the Flint Odyssey House for providing this platform.
Absolutely.
And then again, hello everyone on Facebook Live. Thank you for tuning in. Hello to everyone on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. And somebody said it's awesome how you guys have multiple camera angles as you go live. I want to learn how. Is this a podcast? It's not a podcast. You have to give Paul a call. I don't know how you reach Paul. He'll probably scream it in here. Paul's our producer. Who's like, don't forget to do XYZ. But yeah, 92.1 FM WFOV.
Yes. But we have to talk about the setting, though, right? That's why, based upon what we've just finished talking about, I think it's important for us to practice group economics, right? I think we're going to see a society that becomes increasingly more hardcore as we venture off into the 21st century. We're going to see a society that really embraces even more so social Darwinism. The survival of the fittest. And so if a person is trying to make it on their own, if a person is trying to be an individual, the rugged individual, if the person is not a member of a group, a communal effort to try to bring about resources, right, for themselves, for their families, and for their community, they're going to have a hard way to go. And that's what I really see happening. And that's one of the reasons why I brought Ayn Rand here, because when you have persons who embrace her worldview, they are virtually doing away with the social safety net. And we see that in front of our very eyes right now. They are consistently and systematically hacking away at the Affordable Health Care Act, and they will not rest until it is completely eradicated. We're going to find, moving further into the 21st century, they're going to do away, and you already know this, with Social Security. They're doing away with that. They're doing away with grants. They're doing away with all the means by which a person can gain a university education.
You want to know what's funny?
All these things.
Is that, and John Brent was saying that he agrees with you on the social Darwinism. But one of the things that's interesting that you bring up, one day we should do a show, because I really want people to understand about Social Security, where those dollars actually come from and where they actually go to.
Yes.
You'd be quite surprised that has nothing to do with what you think it has to do with.
Wow.
So I definitely want to do a show
we need
one
to
day.
know.
Oh yeah.
You got to follow the money. We have to follow the money
on Social Security and how that actually works.
Yes.
But I do want to talk a little bit more. Let's talk about how classism affects education.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was one of the things that we were discussing when we were saying that the media they portray certain images when it comes to those living in poverty that are not necessarily the reality of the people living in poverty. So let's talk about how it affects education as far as like standards and conditions. And so recently, and this is something we've talked about on the show before, I think on 2 separate occasions, that the state of Michigan has won lawsuits stating that they did not owe quality education.
That's amazing.
Yes, and both of the I know for one fact that one of the areas that sued the state because of the quality of the education that they were getting it's obviously a mostly urban area. And we find that especially when it comes to poor education, depending on your money and your tax rolls and stuff like that, basically education just depends on how much money everyone else around you has. And I find that very interesting.
Yes, very interesting. To further back up your point, right, I remember several years ago I was attending an educational conference, right, and I was having a conversation with this guy who had just completed his doctorate, right, his PhD, and he had just written his dissertation, and he was sharing with a group of us what his dissertation was about. And his dissertation was this, Candace. He said that America has now entered an era whereby there is a 2-tiered educational system with regard to America's K through 12 public educational system. It is a 2-tiered system consisting of the haves and the have-nots. So you have persons who live in suburban areas who have the stronger tax base, the more affluent communities and whatnot. They have the higher incomes and such, and they are able to back a quality school district, whereby in cities such as ours, Flint, Michigan, and other central cities throughout this country that have experienced a declining tax base, whereby businesses and corporations have pulled up stakes and they've moved out of the city and so forth, and they've taken along with them their employees. So now it hinders the tax base that is there, and the tax base becomes increasingly dilapidated and depleted.
They're not even taking their employees. Forget that. They're just leaving people here broke. They're not even taking. They're outsourcing jobs to other countries.
Absolutely.
For way lower wages than they could dare offer here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they're closing down those schools,
Right.
Candace, and what people are doing is they're now taking their children to these outlying county schools versus the schools that were once populated in the central city. So we see an inequity with regard to resource, with regard to our educational system, and it favors those students who have more resource. On the one hand,
Right, and I just want to talk about hit a little bit on the point of resource, because as you were speaking, that reminded me of what's currently going on. You know, it's cold all around the country at this point. We're experiencing record low temperatures, and so we're coming across a lot of schools that do not even have heat for the children. Like, they literally have to cancel schools because they cannot keep the children warm enough to undereducate them.
to undereducate them. Oh my goodness! Wow, and that's a statement, right? And you know what? On the one hand, I think we're right that resource is important, right? Money is important to further fuel the educational system. But I think more important than money is the will, right? When we look at our community, the question is, do we have the will, the intestinal fortitude to rally around this subject of education, thereby rallying around the future of our children? Right. Since we always say that the children are the future. What do you think, Candace? Are we exhibiting the kind of intestinal fortitude that would allow us to push our educational agendas ahead?
We do have.
Come on now! You gotta answer that question, man.
We told people we gotta get better at reading their comments on Instagram. Robinson said that Bush told us the wave of the future is in privatized insurance and self-employment. And then John Wilson said the way people will be employed will certainly change as the rest of the world takes up mass production jobs we once had. So self-employment may be the best option to better ensure being employed at all. He's speaking on globalization there.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. That's important.
And globalization is definitely important when we talk about classism.
Oh, no question about that. No question about that.
But that was one of the things we also just touched on when you said you have these big corporations that are leaving out of the cities that basically help build them. No doubt. As they're leaving, again, they're taking their jobs and they're giving them to different countries, and like I said, at much lower wages. You have to understand they're taking advantage of third world countries and the fact that that's more money than those people have ever made in their lives.
No doubt about that.
Whereas over here in America, we can't live off what they're trying to pay.
No, those points are very, very important, right? So it's funny how all of our conversations to date take us back to the issue of and the importance of community. Especially when you look at cities such as Flint. Especially throughout the state of Michigan, especially throughout the Rust Belt states, right? Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and so forth.
Whoa! Did you say all of our shows have a common theme?
Of community,
of going back to community.
Are you trying
to tell me that whose opinion is it anyways about bringing the community together?
Better
our economic standpoint. What a concept! What a concept!
You know, and what's that saying that necessity is the motherhood of invention? So when we look at our economic situation here in the city of Flint and in this region, it necessitates creativity.
Right.
No question about that.
I have to tell you though, and there's this song that this artist, I think it's Jaheim or someone, has a song called like Struggle Love. And I remember when I first heard
Struggle Love?
Yeah. No, and it's not what you think. When he was talking about how when people had to come up and build and do things together, it seems as though the love was more real, authentic.
Absolutely.
People had more of a
connection. Yeah,
and so that kind of reminds me, I think that right now, we in America, it's like a beautiful nightmare, if you will. And yeah.
How so? Please explain.
In the sense that I think from all this struggle, what will be birthed is an opportunity for us to come together again as a community.
Yes.
As communities.
Yes.
What will be birthed is an entrepreneurial spirit. What will be birthed from all of these things that are happening. I think we have an opportunity now to learn to move forward together.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I think one of the things, especially as we deal with the topic of classism and the 1% having the wealth.
They have the wealth now. They do have the wealth.
It gives the 99 a chance to come together.
Yes.
And say, hey, wait a minute, you know, and to build ourselves up and to not continue to build on their wealth.
Yes. That's
because again, anytime a company can make $12.7 billion in one day, $12.7 billion in one day, and refuse to give their employees raises?
Yes.
Come on.
Yes, no doubt.
Why are we still supporting that business? That, for me, it's like, you know what? Nah. You won't see another one of my pennies. Probably won't matter, but it'll matter for me.
Yes.
$12.7 billion, and you refuse to give people a raise.
Yes.
And then not only that, but this is how real cognitive dissonance is. Is that you had the employees coming through caping, and again, I explained what caping meant, meaning defending or being a hero for. You have the employees, the very employees who are not getting the raise from that $12.7 billion coming through saying, if they give us money, then they'll have to give XYZ money. Like, no, you don't understand how much $12.7 billion is, apparently. Like, your mind can't wrap around how much money that is. They have enough money to give from the janitor on up a raise and still be okay.
Yes, absolutely. No doubt about that.
And still be fine. You cannot spend $12.7 billion in your lifetime. It's not possible.
No doubt about that.
So you can give your employees a raise.
Absolutely.
Like, you just don't want to.
Is that what it is?
No, yeah. But I'm sure that we'll see that CEO and all the other higher of the highest ups of that company who are already sitting comfortably. I don't even know where you put that money because you already have so much money. I always kind of envision that they actually do just throw piles of money on the bed and roll in it. It's like, we have nothing better to do with this money. We're not sharing it.
That's amazing.
Right.
Wow. But going back to our earlier point about education and community, you know, and we do. Okay, let me delve into a theological term. There's a theological term that is referred to as the Kairos time. And I think that the time that we're living in now is the Kairos time. The Kairos time is the time of crisis on the one hand, yet also the time of great opportunity. So we're faced with that right now. Right in 2018, we're faced with crises. Politically, socially, economically, and whatnot, but at the same time, we're also faced with an upside.
I agree.
A tremendous upside.
I agree. Like I said, the struggle births leaders. It births movements.
Yes.
And unfortunately, what does it say? Pressure makes diamonds.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, sometimes these things have to happen in order to wake people up, in order to get people mobilized and understanding why it is in their best interest to pay attention to the political process for
no doubt about
because that process is the one aiding in the classism.
Oh, no question about that. That's important. But here's the thing, though, Candace. Going back a few decades ago, this area was prosperous.
Yes.
Right? Following World War II,
yes.
I'd say from 1950 approximately upwards until I'd say through the 1970s, we began to decline in the 70s. Some would argue that maybe even in the 50s, this region began to decline somewhat, and that bled into the creation and the formation of the suburban areas and whatnot, right? But having said that, though, how can well, I'll put it this way: out of that became this practice of individualism. In other words, I moved up here from the South. I moved my family north from the South. I got this job with GM, and I began to make money, the likes of which I've never seen before in my life. When I moved from the South, when I lived in the South and I moved initially from the South, I embraced community. I practiced community. Even when I moved here, I practiced community, right? But what, as I became more prosperous, I became more individualized. My focus was upon me and mine and not the community. So the question is this: has the genie escaped the bottle? Has it? I mean, in other words, how can we get back to community when we have people who have been practicing their individual agenda for so long?
I just think it's very interesting. It reminds me of that saying of you see who you really are when the way you treat people when you no longer need them.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about that.
You're saying how can we get back to it?
How can we get back to community? We're being
forced back to it. We're running out of options. You cannot do this alone.
Sure. And I agree with you.
And so I think that we are running out of options. And I think that as long as you keep thinking me, and mine,
I still see that mindset.
I agree, but that's why you still see people literally like snow as the best analogy, spinning their wheels. You're not moving.
Absolutely,
you're stuck.
No doubt.
You're still in the same place.
No question about that.
And
no question about that.
Again, the best way to combat classism and the best way to to deal with that and not have such a huge income gap here is that you have to stand with those who have like interests of yours. You just do.
I agree with like-minded people. I agree with you about that.
Right. And then John Wilson said there are tremendous opportunities now that never existed before for commerce. Like he said, look at Amazon, then look at Etsy, which is primarily for makers of goods that are average people. The internet has given both of those business models potential that they never had before.
Okay. Yeah. He makes some good points there.
He does.
You know? But I want to read a quick statement from Noam Chomsky.
I was going to quote him today, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to back off my quotes, but go ahead.
Noam Chomsky, right? He was a professor at MIT, a leading professor in linguistics, but he's also an activist. This book is entitled Profit Over People by Noam Chomsky, and he's critiquing neoliberalism.
I just want to see if you're going to read my quote that I was going to read. Go ahead.
Okay, here's the quote from page 7 of his book regarding neoliberalism. He says that neoliberalism is the defining political economic paradigm of our time. It refers to the policies and processes whereby a relative handful of private interests are permitted to control as much as possible of social life in order to maximize their personal profit. Now I want to read another quote here from him, and this one is eye-opening, right? He says that the neoliberal system, therefore, now get this, Candace, the neoliberal system, therefore, has an important and necessary byproduct, a depoliticized citizenry marked by apathy and cynicism. If electoral democracy affects little of social life, it is irrational to devote much attention to it in the United States. The spawning ground of neoliberal democracy, voter turnout in the 1998 congressional elections arguably was a record low, with just over 1/3 of eligible voters going to the polls. Does it sound familiar?
Right, that was the one I had from him. I had the one where he said, well, there's always a class war going on. The United States, to an unusual extent, is a business-run society, more so than others. The business classes are very class conscious.
Yes.
They're constantly fighting a bitter class war to improve their power and diminish opposition. Occasionally, this is recognized.
Yes.
The enormous benefits given to the very wealthy, the privileges for the very wealthy here are way beyond those of other comparable societies, and are part of the ongoing class war. Take a look at CEO salaries.
My goodness, absolutely. So this is the same spirit in both threads there that we quoted here. And Candace, I also recall from a previous article that I read, I can't recall the name of that article, but it lifted up a number of characteristics relative to neoliberalism. It says, number one, it's anti-community. Number one. Number two, it's anti or against the social safety net. Number three, it's anti-union. Number four, it's pro-privatization. You made reference to privatization a few minutes ago. And it's pro-individual. Do we not see these characteristics in our society right now?
Right,
are they not?
And I do want to go through with just a few more since you were going there of common factors thought to impact economic inequality.
Sure.
Labor market outcomes, globalization, which we talked about earlier, meaning suppressing wages and low-skilled jobs.
Sure.
Increasing the market size and rewards for people and firms, providing more investment opportunities for already wealthy people, increasing international influence, decreasing domestic influence, ding, 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 decreasing domestic influence.
Absolutely.
Policy reform, extra legal ownership of property, real estate and business, more regressive taxation.
Yes. No doubt.
And another thing that they kind of touched on was computerization and automation. And increased technology, which means more skills are required to obtain a moderate or high-wage job.
Oh, no doubt about
that. And then,
that.
of course, there's ethnic discrimination, gender discrimination, nepotism, variation in natural ability, and, of course, as you mentioned, neoliberalism.
No question. That's it. That's it.
Then the growing acceptance of very high CEO salaries, i.e. the example I gave earlier of somebody that worked for the company that got $12.7 billion that they weren't going to get a raise off of was defending the very company.
There you go.
So
there you go. So we see each of these points illustrated in our society. Each of these points, right? So it's important for us to broach this topic. I've seen the light, Candace. I've seen the light. I see the importance of having this conversation. So the question then is this: what do we do now? Right? What do we do now?
I think that is one of those things that we've been discussing all along is the community, and the importance of community, and how and us coming together. First of all, to do as we do on Whose Opinion Is It Anyway, and that is to talk about it, to provide the platform to say, this is what is going on, this is how it's happening, and then having people come in such as they do on Facebook and commenting. And again, we urge and invite everyone that is watching on Facebook, you're always free to share the video with whomever and have them join in on the conversation as well. Also on YouTube, we welcome the opinions and the conversations and the discussion. And then I think the next thing we do, because we keep talking about it again, and when we say set an agenda, if you can't figure out one, whatever they're doing that you don't like is your agenda. The opposite of that, that's your agenda. That is your agenda. And then we come together and we actually support these businesses.
Okay.
The entrepreneurs within our community. Yes. So we give them an actual chance. Because so many times someone does something that we do not like. And we'll go, you know what, I'm not spending my money here anymore. Absolutely. Then we'll go back to the corporation who's done things we didn't like for years on end. And we'll complain about them and the power that they have, but realizing we're the ones who keep giving them that authority. So I think that we need to support entrepreneurs. I'm definitely a firm believer in supporting entrepreneurship. Then,
no doubt about it.
And then as far as like the education and that gap there, sometimes you might have to take it back and just be old school. We might have to do those after school programs where we volunteer.
There you go. Absolutely.
Our time to educate our children within our community.
Absolutely. And that goes back to the earlier question: does the community still have the will, right, to push our educational agenda, right? And by doing that, we're pushing our children into their future, right, into their purpose, into their destiny. That's essential, I think. And there's another quote, Candace, that you have made from time to time. And I can't recall what that quote is. I think
was it when I was like, please subscribe to Spectacle TV on YouTube?
Not that quote. I guess that's a necessary quote for us to make.
or thanks to the Flint Odyssey House for
providing that programming. That too.
Not that one. Thank you for tuning in to Who's Opinion.
No. It's the fact that every generation has a battle.
Oh, you better believe that.
How does that quote go?
Scott King.
There you go.
Every generation they have to fight for their freedom. You have to. And she was saying that's a conversation that we do not have, but both the young and the old. The struggle is constant.
Absolutely.
And every generation will have to struggle for its freedom.
No doubt about that. So there's work for us to do. There's a lot of work for us to do.
Always work.
So we got to get back in fighting shape. I mean, We had to get back in fighting shape, man.
I'm with you.
So you know what we like. Here. Okay, I'm showing my age again. I remember when Mike Tyson. I don't know if you remember this. I remember when Mike Tyson lost his crown.
Okay.
That was a cautionary tale, man, because Mike Tyson was a bad dude. He was knocking people out left and right, right? Okay, he had some erratic behavior from time to time, but I'm talking about his boxing career in the ring. That guy was bad. But I remember when he fought Buster Douglas. Remember that fight? You don't know.
That's not the one you bit in the ear, is it?
Not that one. It's not that one.
No, I got
this,
you. I'm with you.
This is the first time he lost his he lost his title. Mm-hmm. And no one could believe it. The great Mike Tyson had fallen. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, right? But actually, he lost the fight before he even got in the ring. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? I'm making a point here, right? I'm gonna get there eventually. But I know we just got a couple of minutes left. But there was all types of chaos taking place in Mike Tyson's life concerning his marriage woes, his personal woes, health woes. And then leading up to that match, he was not focused. He was not focused. Mm-hmm. He was not as focused as he was previously, because he had ceased to be the iron Mike Tyson that he was, that was knocking people out in 30 seconds, right, in his previous fights, right? On that night, the world could not believe that the great Mike Tyson was knocked out. And I think that's a cautionary tale. And to me, that's how our community is right now. We got to get our focus back. Right. If there's any validity to the quote that you just made, it tells me that we have to get ourselves back in shape, back in fighting shape and in fighting condition. We have to have that focus, man. We have to get that fire back. Where's the fire?
It's right there with you.
I'm just saying, you know. Where's the focus? Where's the fire? The determination, the will. You know what I mean? We got to get back there. And I think because of that, Candace, as you look around, I'm sure as I look around and I look at different examples throughout our community, throughout our society, I'm like, man, where's the fight? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, we have people who are doing things that they could not have gotten away with in the 60s or the 70s or even the 80s or the 90s. And I see that now. What do you think about that?
I think that we have 4 minutes left.
Okay.
And that, as much as I would love to get into that,
that's the cliffhanger.
Right, there we go.
Join us next week, right, ladies and gentlemen.
We do want people to join us next week, because we'll be doing giveaways for tickets for Mama Soul and the Nuts performance in Detroit on January 20th.
Oh, there we go.
We will have the opportunity to hang out with the man himself, Vic, in Detroit on January 20th. We will be doing a ticket giveaway. We'll be giving away more than one ticket next week, but we'll be giving away some tickets for that event in Detroit. If you're not familiar with Mama Soul and the Nuts, hopefully we will be able to play some of her music, their music next week.
Absolutely.
But if you're from the Flint area, even if you're from Atlanta, quite a few areas, you are familiar with Mama Soul and the Nuts, so you understand that being able to go to that show on January 20th would be a huge deal. And we want to make sure that we send a couple people now. I said you can hang out with Vic. I didn't say you can ride down there with him, but if you see him on the streets and you want to ask him for a ride, I'm not going to stop you. But Vic will be in attendance at that show, so we want to make sure that we give our opinionated #opinionated, that's what we call everybody.
No doubt.
That we give the opinionated some tickets. So this is our first giveaway ever.
Absolutely.
2018. Here we go.
Right.
Good way to kick off the year.
No doubt about it.
I have another engagement, so this time you guys have Vic all to yourself.
Oh, wow.
With him on that evening.
No doubt.
Again, we want to thank Flint Odyssey House for providing such great programming over here at 92.1 FM WFOV. If you would like to start your own show, Paul scroll it somewhere in there, Paul. Work your magic. Let's scroll it around the screen. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Spectacle TV on YouTube. We are live 5 to 6 p.m. every Friday nights. We're you can catch a replay 5 to 6 a.m. on Saturday mornings and 11 a.m. on Saturday mornings. Look at that. 3 opportunities to see these faces, to hear these voices.
That's right.
We definitely encourage everyone to tune in, call in. Thank you for everyone that was live with us on Facebook. Thank you again, John Wilson. He said some good points you made. Glad I stopped in. We are here next week, 5 to 6 p.m. Live. So tune in again next week. Feel free to share your opinions. You've been listening to Whose Opinion Is It Anyway with Candace
and Victor
right here on WFOV 92.1 FM. Thank you.
Luta continua.